What an abrupt kick to the end of that. So sorry about that, folks. Hey, listen, let me start by saying that this is the middle of our heroes of the local area, and I want to make sure that we acknowledge some of my heroes right here. Five Star Guitars, based in Beaverton, Oregon. They have sponsored this show since last year, and they've got the greatest selection of guitars. They have lessons, they do repairs, and so if you want to get great lessons from pros like Jennifer Batten, reach out to fivestarguitars.com/allaccesslive. Hit the link below and use the promo code of allaccess15, and you'll get 15% off everything you see. Plus, since they're based in Oregon, that means that there's no sales tax. So you're going to save a ton of dough, and you'll be supporting my show as well as supporting them. So let them know I sent you. Also, great friends of my next guests, Rhythm Traders, based in Portland, Oregon, for over 30 years. They've got an incredible selection of drums. They also do repairs and lessons. And so if you go to rhythmtraders.com and let them know that All Access Live with Kevin Rankin sent you, they'll give you 10% off. And again, there's no sales tax. So we're saving you lots of money and giving you plenty of entertainment from local inspiration sources. So now, let me just say before we get started, if you're looking at this on anything else other than YouTube, I would love it if you do me a favor. Go to youtube.com/allaccesslive with Kevin Rankin. That link below. You can hit the subscribe button, hit the like, and also the bell, and you'll be notified of all future episodes. So I believe this is episode 240, and we've got lots and lots of content that's been a pretty entertaining experience for me over the last year and a half. And so the next guest that I have coming up, I've got some great ones. Portland Cello Project. We're going to talk a little bit about their touring opportunities, their tributes to Prince. And I also have, let's see, we may have Rob Wynia today too. I was just actually looking at another note from somebody else asking if he's going to be here. So Rob, you may know Rob Wynia from Floater, and we're hoping that he's going to join us. But first, we've got, I think, probably the most important part of any band. We've got the drummer from that band here. I have Mark Powers. Mark, how you doing, buddy?
Kevin, awesome. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad to have you, bud. I don't have my caffeine in me enough to have the synapses fired. But you know what? It's what I needed. I need to be out forest bathing like we're doing right now. So welcome to everyone who's here enjoying the Pacific Northwest with us.
Yeah, Shinrin Yoku. I love the forest bathing.
That is, yes. Was that Rob's investigation that found that term, or was that how do you guys come up with your?
Yeah, the forest bathing episode that we recorded recently that you're referring to is something that Rob had stumbled across somewhere and brought up to me at one point, and we definitely knew that we needed to feature it on the podcast at some point. But definitely a cool concept. Like we were talking about, I think it's something that is somewhat obvious to all of us, but it's cool to actually look at the research and further concrete, the value in doing that.
There's empirical data. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I should tell people what we're talking about. Aside from being an incredible drummer, Mark Powers is also the co-host of the Igniter podcast, which I'm going to put up here. If you guys are looking for a source of inspiration and creativity and some sort of drive to find a way to better your life, their podcast is incredible. And we were talking about the most recent episode where forest bathing was the term, but it was essentially, well, I'll have them tell you. It looks like we've got Rob joining us from afar as well. He's a silhouette. I love that.
Nice. He's making it in.
Yeah, good to see you, Rob.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic.
This is a wonderful picture of you here right now. We've got a silhouette with headphones and some spiky hair. Beautiful.
Sorry, it's the only lighting.
No, it's cool.
The window. So
thank you for making it. I appreciate it.
awesome.
Hey, yeah. So I was just talking about your forest bathing episode, and before we actually get into the guts of that, why don't you guys talk a little bit about what Igniter Pod is all about, what your goal, and maybe how it got started?
Me?
Yeah, you
Go for it.
Okay. I mean, I felt for kind of a long time, and Mark and I had talked a lot when we were on tour over long drives. And I don't mean to get all downer, but we spent several years just feeling like there was a lot of negativity, a lot of stress. Everyone we were talking to, it's kind of the cultural division and fear and climate change and just sort of that we were living in a world that was falling apart before our eyes. And we kept having these conversations about like, well, we're not doctors, we're not astrophysicists. What do we do to try to put something out there that's additive? We want to maybe throw something into the internet conversation that isn't shade. And so we thought, well, what we do is create. Like we write, we record, we produce other people, and we have a lot of friends that are painters, filmmakers, actors, sculptors, poets, and we just thought, everybody gets stuck. So maybe we should try to make a show that just talks about how to stay or get unstuck.
I love it. Yeah, I was thinking about a couple of episodes that I listened to right off the bat. I came to your podcast a little bit late, and some of the origin of this show also came from that, right? So my sense was that I was used to being on tour. I was missing my buddies and the people that we would see out on the road. And when this pandemic started, we thought, my guitarist and I got on Facebook Live, and we were chatting about how, man, this might go on for 3 or 4 weeks. What are we going to do in that time, right? And people would chime in. Yeah, I know. It's funny now, right? It hasn't been funny, but
Sort of cry funny.
yeah, you have to laugh, otherwise you'll cry. But I know that a lot of people were chiming in with either their commiseration, for their life shutting down, or sharing some inspiration about where they would find light in that kind of crazy time. And the light was important. I needed it, and a lot of other people did too. And so the idea to bring in conversations with people that had maybe they'd overcome adversity in the past, and they had a great attitude or perspective that might be able to share with somebody. And that's absolutely what you guys have done in a really succinct way. My stuff is kind of nebulous. We have conversations, and sometimes they go really well, and sometimes people can get really vulnerable, and it's nice to be able to have people open their hearts that way. But what I find in every episode is that, for me, it's kind of like this special time that I can go in and just kind of flush all that stuff that I had going on during the day or the week, and I've got a whole bunch of tools that I can go out there and use to not only get unstuck, but it really, I just needed a flush of perspective. And so the forest episode, this most recent one, was completely that way. Because during the pandemic, that's where I really found solace. I would go out and start getting 60 seconds of serenity is what I was choosing with my dog, right? And we've got a forest out here that we were going to every day. And I didn't know about the empirical data and the studies. I mean, we all know, right, that going into this space of solitude is really good for our brains and hearts. But the fact that you researched that and found this and brought this in your podcast was really, really cool. And so do you mind sharing a little bit about how the findings you found there and where that took you guys in the show?
Well, for my part, I mean, the term forest bathing was brought to my attention when I was in Japan playing a bunch of solo acoustic shows at some clubs for like a month, and it got brought up a couple of times when I was chatting with some people, and there was this sort of, oh, well, there are groups or individuals that go and do the forest bathing, and I was like, they take a bath, and I don't understand. Right. And the more it was explained to me, no, this is a practice. And I sort of said to my wife, oh, it's interesting that they embrace a practice that's just a thing that we sort of feel in our gut, I mean, if you tell somebody, oh, if you're feeling bad or stuck or whatever, you can just go to a natural area and you'll feel better. They go, yeah, maybe. I mean, I could see that maybe working. I don't know. But then I realized that it was an actual practice in Japan, and then back here in the States, it's an actual practice as well. There are articles in National Geographic about it and stuff. So, and when I brought it up to Mark, he did what Mark is so good at, which is like deep dive research. And I was like, wow, who knew? It was pretty cool.
I was just going to just mention that. Okay, so Mark is a natural speaker, right? He's somebody that I know has been kind of a visionary already in the drumming world and education. He's really fantastic about being able to communicate ideas in a very succinct and clear way. So when you guys got together and you put together the podcast to find ways to share about people getting unstuck, I love the interchange that you guys have. So maybe for you, Mark, when you guys talked about this on the road, you felt like you wanted to have more positive direction and sharing this stuff as a podcast. Did you feel like you had it in your bandwidth? Because I know you're teaching a lot, you're writing books, and you got a lot of stuff on your plate. And I know you too, Rob. I mean, you're traveling and you're working all the time. How do you guys find time to do the research, to produce this show, and have it come out? I mean, it's really professionally done. It's a really, really fantastic show.
Oh man, thank you.
So for you, Mark, I mean, how did you hear that and think, okay, yeah, I'm completely inspired and I want to do this, or were you thinking, oh my God, it's another project that I got to invest time in?
I think with something like this, there's always a little bit of both. I mean, the idea of doing a podcast together, like Rob said, is something that came up multiple times as we were on the road traveling. You know, you spend enough times and enough miles sitting next to somebody and jib-jabbing about different ideas and, you know, comparing notes and throwing inspiring things back and forth, and you're bound to come up with some ideas. And I think that he and I certainly, I mean, we're kind of partners in crime on a number of things, and we thankfully actually probably pursue far fewer of the ideas than we actually do pursue together, just because there wouldn't be enough time. But this is one of those things that I think we've been wanting to do in some capacity for a while, but we didn't necessarily know what that would look like. You know, we bounced the podcast idea around, and you know, the pandemic, as Rob was saying, just kind of brought all of us to a different place. And I think not only, like he was saying, did we find it to be something that we hoped would be valuable for other people, but I think it was therapeutic and still is just for us. I mean, it's great for, you know, Rob and I to not only, you know, like do some research on some of these ideas, but be able to have even more of a reason to bounce some of the ideas off of each other. And I benefit from stuff that he pulls up, you know. I hope that, you know, the opposite is true. And and we're just hoping that our process of, you know, trying to find inspiration and get past creative blocks is something that might be useful, you know, at least have some tidbits that might be useful for other people.
It is. I mean, for me, do you guys get a chance to take a look at the feedback that you have, say, on your Apple Podcast channel or Spotify? You look at some of that feedback?
Yeah.
I've seen some of the reviews, and I think, you know, the same that I've felt is that it's that jump start that a lot of people need, you know, to be able to get out of the rut.
Great.
Yeah. No, here's the, you know, when you talked about, Rob, when you mentioned that it derived from the grueling parts of being out on the road, I know that for me, the greatest parts about being on the road are, number one, being on stage, of course, you know, the experience you have on stage. For me, also, you know, being able to travel and see spots and get to meet people that are amazing, which I should bring up. Jurgles in Pennsylvania, the house manager walked up to me as we were setting up in Pennsylvania a couple months ago, and he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I'm Portland, Oregon." He goes, "You don't happen to know Floater?" And pulls out his hat. And I said, "Oh my God, yeah." So his favorite band, I guess he went to school with you, Rob, and he was pretty excited that we knew each other. But when you're out there and you're meeting people, I find inspiration from a lot of those people, especially in different pockets where, had it not been for music, there's no way we would have come across each other. The rest of the time, when you're traveling in a van, or you're stuck in an airport, or backstage, hanging out, waiting between sound check and the show, it is the grueling time. And a lot of people that don't play music, they don't realize that that's what a lot of the music industry is, right? So do you find ways to get out of that rut when you're out there so that you can kind of sort of remain healthy-minded? How about you first, Mark?
Yeah, I think for me, in those times where I feel either the monotony of, the road thing, and, from venue to hotel to van to venue to hotel to van, that sort of deal. It's important just to like get myself somewhere else. And, a lot of times that's just taking off. If you're just in a city and not able to get out into nature, just taking off and getting utterly lost on some city street somewhere and head off in some crazy direction. And, sometimes, I mean, you're on the road together as a family, and that's awesome, and it's a beautiful thing. And us on the road together, we're definitely close. We can spend days on end together, and it's fine. There are no crazy family fights. But at the same time, you get to the little town of Winnemucca, as Rob knows, and like you find your time to get away and do laundry and whatever you're going to do. And sometimes you just take that extra day off to go opposite directions and get yourself lost. And these days with GPS on the phone, you can't really get lost, so it's a matter of getting as disconnected as you can. And you just end up stumbling across new things you would have never expected to find in those places. And for me, that's just rejuvenating, just because it's a break from the norm when you're out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rob, I know for you guys, I mean, the original formation of the band, there's a cult following, right? And the band's been around for quite a while. And if you remember our days back, there were a handful of shows that Floater and Ana Lama were playing gigs together.
Yeah.
My old gig. And I remember being impressed with how dedicated fans were of that band. I hate to say fans, because truly, when we're out traveling and there's somebody that's supportive and they're paying to go see shows and they're flying in or they're getting hotel rooms, they're friends. They really are a closer connection. But there was such a dedicated base of people that were so supportive of the band. That was mid 90s, right? I mean, mid to late 90s. And so like fast forward to, we're at the start of the 2020s. Do you still have that same sort of stable base? I mean, obviously in Pennsylvania you do, but people when you're on the road, they can't believe that you're still there 25 years later, it's rocking and bringing them the goods.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think if I were to just base it on the feedback that I get, emails and Facebook comments and stuff like that, I think there's a lot more desire out there for us to stay on the road than maybe we necessarily have to actually get in the van and go do it.
Sure. Yeah.
So we play a lot more around home, and they're great. They're sold out, great big shows, which is a blast, and everybody has a really good time. And then we kind of go back to our homes, which we're big fans of. So
yeah, when you're younger, being on the road just seems like the ultimate destination. But I know for me, I love being out there, especially after having time off for the pandemic. But coming home, and finding that space for me, being out in the woods with my dog, right? That's my go-to spot. But do you have, aside from Eugene, right? That was home for the band, the formation of the band. Where do you feel like people are most connected to Floater?
to Floater, definitely Pacific Northwest. I mean, our home region is definitely where, and a lot of that is because we like being here. So, we we play our shows around here, and so most of our friends and family and fans and everything are around here. And I know that we get a lot of that. Oh, come to Pennsylvania, come to, and we're like, yeah, it's really far.
Yeah, especially if you're driving, right? A lot of spots in between. Right?
Yeah.
Have you done some international stuff? Have you gone over to Europe or Asia?
Floater has not. No, I've done quite a bit of that solo. I think my last 2018, 2019, I played solo shows in like 20 something countries. But that's just, I travel really light when it's just me. And Mark is a big fan of doing that. So actually a handful of those, like we played shows together as a duo, in, Iceland and all over Italy and, in Malta. And we didn't quite, we almost met up to play shows in Southeast Asia. but didn't quite get to pull that off. But yeah, I tried to get him to come over to Tokyo, but I couldn't get that one either. But
I'm trying to think, Mark, the last time that we saw each other in an airport, you were heading off to do some corporate gig, right? And I was
Yeah.
in Flock of Seagulls, and I think, were you going to like Texas? Is that right?
You know, that was quite a while ago. That was the last time I ran into you. It was like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, running into the airport, got through security, and there you were.
Yeah.
I think I was headed off to Atlanta, I think, for a corporate gig over at the Tabernacle, I think.
That's right.
Yeah, that was funny running into you heading, to that side of it. I think you were headed to Florida or something.
Probably, yeah. Like, just the crazy thing is that I'll run into more people in our musical circle out on, in airports. If I post anything online, then somebody will come up at, Terminal C in Chicago, and they're like, oh, yeah, I just saw you checked in on Facebook or Instagram, and especially like industry guys, Jason Goers, lighting guy, I run into them everywhere, and I think that's one of the nice surprises too when you're out, right? When you get a friendly face and because it brings you back home, But
Yep.
so thinking about the band, and I definitely, just wanted to mention, I thought you guys in the Igniter podcast really paid a tremendous dedication to the untimely passing of Pete. I remember, it like a phenomenal compliment to the Floater band. His drumming was really unique, and I know that he had a lot of friends, in the Floater community. Seeing Mark come into that group, it was a really cool transition. I thought it was handled great. That from what I could tell, friends of the band, embraced Mark in a great way. Did you feel welcomed in, Mark, by the fans as well as like Dave and Rob?
Oh yeah, I mean, you of all people, you've been in this situation where you've replaced, drummers in, other projects, and just how different that can be for people. And so I completely respected that, that would be cool to some and not cool to some, but people were really warm, and I guess I gave myself a little bit of time to grow into it. I think to be totally honest, I probably didn't embrace it as quickly as some other people did, and I think it's because for a lot of fans, me coming on board allowed them to still keep going out and hear their favorite band play their favorite songs, and that was really important to a lot of people. But for me, just because of the shoes that I was stepping into, I honestly, probably not many people other than the band themselves know this, but I actually did not allow myself to consider myself a member of the band until after I got through the first 2 CD release shows. I thought, if I can get through a Portland show and I can get through a Eugene show, and I'm not booed off stage, and I like survive the shows, which are super high energy and tons of fun. I figured if I can get through those, I will start owning this thing. But up until that point, I need to just play it cool myself. But yeah, people have been absolutely incredible.
You reminded me of a situation I had. Speaking of similar situations we were in, a Flock of Seagulls has been around a long time as well, right? I mean, since '81, they really had their first hits, and I'm not the next replacement in line. I mean, there are series of guys in between, but the original drummer was the brother of the singer, and so real hardcore fans of the band really feel like there's only been one iteration of the band, right? The original. And so there are Facebook groups that are out there that are fans of the original Flock of Seagulls, and while they honor that generation of the band, there's a lot of name calling and really the bitter things. And so we were playing a show at the Cavern Club in Liverpool, right, where the band, the Flock is from Liverpool, and we were going back, and for me it was a great opportunity to go back and see Beatles legacy and all this, and a lot of these people really got brutal towards me and the bass player. And they were just like, how dare they even go out to, to play? And I said, hey, guys, the people that are here from Liverpool that have been saying this stuff, I totally get it. I'm a huge fan of the original members of the band, and fortunately that iteration didn't stick around. I welcome you to come out. I would love to have you guys come out. If you just feel like it's just, we don't do it justice, I'll give you your money back. And so I ran into a few of them at this table at the Cavern Club after the show, and they were like, wow, the band's completely different. But, you gave it a totally different light. It was a new band. It was almost like seeing a different band playing our favorite songs. But in that Facebook group, I started seeing, wow, the drummer's actually really nice. So it wasn't that I was out there trying to kiss their ass, but I did want them to at least give the brand a break,
Yeah.
And it's cool that people received you that way. I mean, you're a phenomenal drummer. And, it's... I'm sure that the band has taken a little bit of a turn in terms of your creative input, and the fact that you guys could go out and do these duet shows, I think is really cool. I have a picture that, Rob, you doing your thing, and Mark, do you bring along electronic percussion, or how are you doing this gig? Are you playing like a djembe? And
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I kind of, playing with Rob, I look at my setups and my approach in 3 different ways. I mean, there's actually 4 different ways, I should say, because there's the typical floater electric show, which is what everybody's most familiar with. And, it's just like us versus them. It's the 3 of us, throwing punches, to 1,000 people out there. And then there's the floater acoustic shows, which, they're not acoustic. Who are we kidding? But they're definitely, far more tamed down. And with that, I tend to really do a hybrid setup, kind of a partial drum set and a lot of West African toys that I brought back from studies overseas. And then there's the Rob Wynia and the Sound shows. And, if you're familiar with any of that material, it's definitely quite a bit different. So that might just be kind of stripped down, small vintage kit sort of vibe. But then when we do the duo stuff, I often will just do kick, snare, 1 crash, 1 hat, and then like a little MIDI keyboard playing some stuff out of Ableton. So
nice.
toying around with some sounds like that, and try to add whatever backup vocals I can. And that whole vibe with Rob, it just being Rob and I and him on acoustic is just so much more intimate. I try to just let the percussion stuff not get in the way too much.
Rob, did you guys know each other before you hadn't joined the band?
I was working on.
I'm losing you for a second there, Rob. 1 sec. I think it might be a connection thing. We lost you. It's a little bit broken. This is some of the benefit of doing this live, right? This is the stuff you can fix in post on your show. Mark, are you able to hear him all right?
No, it is a little choppy.
Okay. All right. So before you get in, we're gonna wait for your internet synapses to catch back up. I was gonna ask you, and Mark, did you know Rob prior to you being asked to join the band?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Not a lot of people know that story. It's all because of this mutual connection that we had with Daniel Riddle from King Black Acid.
Right.
And over the few years before we met, Daniel would bring me in as a hired gun, or he would recommend me as a hired gun for different singer-songwriters that would come into Mazinga Studios, his space. And Rob actually just ended up one day being one of those guys. I didn't know Rob at all, and Daniel recommended me for a session that Rob was doing for Brave the Strange, which is his most recent solo album. Yeah. And he had 2 drummers each already record a song, so 2 of the songs were done, but he was finally at that point where he was ready to just pound out the rest of the album. And I, was fortunate enough to just be brought on at that point. And, fast forward 6 or 9 months, I didn't hear from him again until suddenly that album was coming out, and he decided to put a band together to solo the project, tour the project. And I ended up kind of getting the call to jump on board and do that. So by the time the opportunity came around to join Floater, I been in the family already. We'd played a few Floater tunes, not anywhere close to the same intensity or volume or anything, but I was kind of in the mix a little bit at that point.
That's because there's definitely chemistry there. You hear it when you guys do the podcast, and I think I know that I keep touting this thing, but your podcast really is so well done because it. I feel like you bring in some of the local sponsorship and you acknowledge them in a great way, but it doesn't seem Portland centric. For those people that are watching this that are not in the Northwest area, a lot of times if you listen to a podcast that comes out of Portland, everything is fairly based around the goings on of the area. And I feel like anybody in Reykjavik, could benefit from the Igniter podcast and some of the tips you've got. So cheers to Iceland. I'm glad you gave a nod there because it's close to my heart too. But
Yeah.
all right, and it sounds like you're back. Your connection's
Am I
good.
back?
Yeah, you're here, buddy.
Oh, good. Okay. I never lost you guys, so I was just kind of waiting for.
I'm glad to know that you're a silhouette today because I had done my hair blonde and trying to get the Rob Wynia look, and I saw Angela the other day and she said, "Nope, it's not blonde anymore." So
No.
damn it. All right, so
It's, I do stuff to my head, and then I don't know, whatever.
yeah, I as long as we still have any hair on our head, I'm going to continue to do weird stuff too. Like my kids are bright redhead, and they would get teased when they were younger. So I started going purple and crazy colors, telling them, man, you know what? It's cool to be different. Embrace it while you can, And so it was more of a nod.
It's a bunch of dead cells that just keep growing out of your scalp. So
Right.
I don't know why people make such a big deal out of it.
Well,
But anyway,
aesthetics, man.
yeah, I guess.
We can't all be blessed with good looks and intellect like you guys have. But so the in the future. Sorry, here comes that connection again.
Oh my God.
Where in the world are you right now, Rob? We can't tell. I think the CIA might be cutting his connection.
Can't tell you. I'd have to kill you.
Right. Do you know where he's at, Mark?
I believe he is in Burbank.
Oh.
Rob, give a nod if I'm correct. Yes,
Oh,
all right.
all right.
Woo! I win.
Fantastic. I could not believe we were just down in Burbank in September, and the whole main area of Burbank seems completely different to me now. It was beautiful. Nice walking area that reminded me of Northwest 23rd in Portland, and
Nice.
lots of good restaurants. Yeah, it didn't just seem like TV City to me. So
I'm headed down there to work with drummer Blair Cinta at his studio a couple days next month, and I always love flying into that airport. You get to walk out, get through the luggage outside. It's one of my favorites.
yeah,
Bob Hope.
Bob Hope,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah, I try to get in and out of there as much as I can, or John Wayne for South, right? I definitely don't like to get into LAX. Man.
LAX.
Nobody does. So no one ever says, "Oh, I love LAX." It's a breeze to get in and out of, and they make it harder each time now. Getting an Uber from there, you've got to take a train to a completely different part of the city. It takes like 3 hours. Yeah. Anyway, enough of that travel stuff. When you guys do travel, when you're traveling with Floater, do you have a crew? Do you have a crew of guys that come along with you guys
Yeah.
to help you out?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty small
Yeah.
because we're a small band. But yeah, we like to travel. We really, really hard not to travel without our own sound engineer. And no offense to the house sound engineers, substitute for our guy. And so
You have to preface that, right? Because if you're going to go to some city and for some reason you can't have your guy, and you alienate one of those guys now, their mix is going to be horrible. I know.
right. No, I
we-
mean, we've worked with a great, engineers. It's sort of the nature of how we do because we have
Rob, I'm totally cutting you off, but this is awesome. You're speaking in code. Most people that are watching this or will listen to it later, they're going to have no idea that Rob was actually speaking a completely different language. Part of the pandemic, Rob chose to find a new code language. And so what a blessing. What a blessing to have you debut it right here on All Access Live, man. Hey, speaking of podcasts too, you guys have some really cool sponsors. I know that you're working with Revival Drum Shop, which is the other amazing drum shop I feel like in the Portland area. Revival and Rhythm Traders kind of work hand in hand a lot of times and synergistically. How are you guys connected to some of the other sponsors? How do you guys get them? I mean, not that I'm pitching, but it's great to be able to support an organization you really believe in, right? So we're not the Joe Rogan podcast out there pimping, whatever horse pills you can get.
Yeah, I mean, Music Millennium. I mean, it's obviously Terry over there. I mean, it supports music so many ways, and we've in various capacities played shows in the space, for CD releases and things like that along those lines. So, definitely somebody that we've each known independently. Known that shop for a long time, and Revival Drum Shop, Jose Medelis over there, Carrie, Jake, everybody. I mean, just can't go wrong. As a drummer, you can't not pop into that place for sure. I mean, all the cool sounds. And Jose and I recently have been kind of in cahoots on a couple of different projects. And but yeah, super cool to just be able to support friends who have local businesses for sure.
I'm glad you mentioned Music Millennium. So for anybody watching this that has not been in the Portland area, Music Millennium, hands down the greatest record store on the planet existing right now. And Terry Courier is probably the greatest champion for regional music and keeping independent music alive. So if you like supporting independent music, go to musicmillennium.com. They're phenomenal. So Portland is worth a trip just to go to Music Millennium. That's the truth. People come to Portland and they hit Powell's Bookstore, and it's a fantastic place to visit. You can go see Multnomah Falls, but I think the third stop on the list has to be Music Millennium. So
and then Revival.
And then Revival, of course. Yeah, but not everybody's a drummer, right? But everybody loves music, right?
Yeah, but every house needs a drum set. So you should get one. Yeah.
Right. Well, Revival they've got an incredible amount of like vintage drums, right? So they've got unique vintage gear that drummers look for all over the planet, and you don't have to look all over the planet. You just go and talk to Jose, right? So
yeah,
and then stop into Revival or to Rhythm Traders and get the rest of your gear. So
yeah, you got to say hey to Brad Boynton as well. You got to say hey to him.
We covered all the bases here on the sponsorship. What's next for the collective of Floater? What are you guys doing? Rob?
Am I on?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You don't even have to speak in code this time. You can tell the people.
I'll try. Well, the unfortunate news as far like for fans is that I think just with COVID, it's really pushed all three of us into doing a lot of other things. So we spend frustratingly little time getting together. I mean, I wish that we were able to spend more time getting together, but COVID just kind of crushed it, So we all three of us we call and text each other all the time and sort of go, "I miss you, man.
Yeah.
When are we going to get together?" And it's like,
right. This COVID thing might
how's
go
your
for
March
5
look? I don't know. Well, my March is really bad. How's your April? Oh, I'm gone in April. Yeah. So hopefully someday soon we'll all be in the same room again.
Had you put anything down to record prior to COVID happening? Is there some stuff that's just waiting to be released?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
We started. We kind of got some sketches put down, and then this was a long while back. It was The Thief had been out for a while, and we were starting to work on some new things, and then COVID sort of stopped everything. We couldn't have practices. We couldn't, so and then it's just never really gone away.
Yeah, it's got to go soon, though, right? We're
Oh my
manifesting
God.
good things.
Yeah.
If everybody could just take a collective breath and well, if you can still breathe, take a collective breath and just wish this stuff away and do our part.
Yeah.
But as far as the independent stuff goes, I know like Mark. Ever since I've known you, you're not only doing a lot of education and teaching. Releasing books is a big part of your thing. You've got some online work as well. So I know you're right there at your drum studio, right? Can you swap cameras so we can see your setup right there?
You want to see the rig? Yeah, we've got
nice.
the drum set here.
Fantastic. Was that 10, 12, 10, 12,
sorry.
13?
This is
10, 12,
10,
14?
12, 16.
Oh,
It is
16. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, it's hard to see from that, but wonderful collection of brass. Very nice, man.
Yeah, I love it.
And so you've got your music stand there. Are you doing some online lessons with that?
Yeah, I mean, I teach some private lessons during the week, and I also do a weekly live group masterclass. And
Okay.
I started doing that the first week of August 2020, And since then, I guess we've missed 1 week. So we've amassed just a ton of live master classes. So people subscribe online, and if you subscribe, you can see the archive of lessons that are saved, as well as all the handouts, and jump in live for them. And then once a month, I have a special guest, and we've had everybody from friends over in Australia to Dax and Nielsen from Cheap Trick, and just all sorts of people pop in and teach lessons or do Q&As, and it's a lot of fun.
I just met Dax for the first time. We played a show together in October down in Cancun.
Nice.
He's in the sand, and yeah, it was really fun to see him doing that gig. How do you guys know each other?
Interestingly, Dax and I have crossed paths in a number of ways. His dad, Rick Nielsen from the band, used to manage an old band of mine. And then when I left that band and moved to Portland, actually Dax, for a former student of mine, replaced me in the band for a little while. And then Dax jumped in and took over with that group for a while. That was before he was playing with Trick. We're kind of started crossing paths, run into kind of a bunch of mutual friends in the industry, so reconnected after a few years. And yeah, he's a great guy. I love Dax.
If somebody wanted to get into the masterclass or part of your independent lessons, how do they find you?
Everything's on my website, so it's my last name and my instrument, so it's powerspercussion.com.
Excellent. They can learn how to incorporate their construction projects into music, right? So
yes,
I love those segments. Those are fantastic.
Yes.
For people that don't know, you want to explain?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was when I was building this studio space. It was with the intentions of doing the master classes and lessons and things, and so I was building at the same time a website for that. And I got a little impatient as I was in the midst of the construction process, and decided to shoot a couple of lesson videos in the mess. So as you know from having seen those, Kevin, it's just like I think I'm sitting on a step ladder, and like the drywall's barely up, and just kind of a mess. So it kind of threw those up online just to give a little teaser about what I was working on.
I think it added some, interest that people might not have gotten from, say, the Kenny Aronoff lesson series. So he was a guest on the show for a while.
I saw that. Yeah.
So that was an interesting one because his backdrop, somewhat like Rob's here. His backdrop was just all gold records, or that's what I thought, right? I said, hey, I'm glad you jumped into that studio room where you could show off a few of the gold records, and I said, you've done 3,000 albums now? And he said, 3,000 that have gone gold, platinum, or diamond. And I said, oh, okay, excellent. All right, so let's talk about a couple of those. But now, independent projects. Rob, people probably already know this, but you're an accomplished author as well, man. You had a book of poetry that came out just prior to the pandemic, and some solo work, man. So your writing has always been poetic. Are you the primary songwriter for the Floater lyrics?
Yeah, I'm the whole.
Oh, he's back to talking code again. Oh, I think whoever employed you to go down to Burbank, they need to get you a dedicated ISDN line. No, Mark, how much do you know about Rob's his solo work right now?
I'm just gonna make some stuff up.
Yeah, do it.
Rob says that he's in Burbank right now, but he is actually in Liverpool himself.
Oh yeah.
And
he's working on the Fans of a Flock of Seagulls Facebook page.
Yeah, nice. He's working over there with a guy who's been developing his songwriting skills, a youngster named Paul McCartney, and someday you might hear of him. But no, I think what Rob was saying is that he's the only lyricist with the band, and hopefully he gets to talk for himself here. But
yeah. Let's hear it, Rob. Are you there? Nope, not yet. Speaking of independent stuff too, I know you guys did a great podcast with Dave Amador, and I remember him talking about his creativity, where he finds and derives his inspiration. I remember him talking about this dedicated room that he'd get to, and it was kind of like a workout room. I mean, some people have their home gym. His was a bank of pedals and and even prior to that, like a 4-track recorder and someplace he can go in and just play everything from. I think he mentioned like mariachi music, and he'd have like horns and everything, and some eclectic stuff. Mr. Bungle kind of came to mind when he mentioned that. I thought about that, and it sounds like you're back. So
good.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about. Do you know what? And we can ask Dave himself when we get Floater on. But
I'm in a hotel, so I'm using the hotel's internet, and it's not my fault, I swear.
No, I believe you. That's okay. But the witness protection program silhouette thing is making me question it. But all right. So we'll ask Dave when he comes on. We have a Floater episode, but your stuff now. So you're the lyricist in Floater, and then the book that you came out with. Was maybe an expansion of being able to take your lyrical inspiration and turn that into print, or where did you feel like that needed to be channeled?
Well, okay, fingers crossed my answer comes across here and doesn't turn into gibberish, but either because of the internet or because of my the connection between my brain and my mouth. I think of the things that I'm writing. After I write them, I will say to myself, are these lyrics or is this something else? And if it's lyrics, where does this go? And it feels like
Oh, it was getting so good there. We had you. Lyrics or something else? Oh, that's disheartening. That's okay, but you know what? These are good cliffhangers though, because it keeps people on the edge of their seat and they're thinking, "Wait, will these be in the next book or the next Floater song?" It's still broken. So while we're waiting for that to clear up, you kind of made me think about this, because finding inspiration for lyrics and being able to write. You talk about this in your podcast. You guys talk about the space for creativity, where to get yourself in a space where you can do that. Part of this was the forest bathing, but I'm wondering if you, and maybe we'll start with Mark while the signal's good, talk about rituals. Maybe do you have like a daily ritual that kind of starts yourself off, whether it be exercise or meditation or journaling, or do you have anything that you kind of follow that keeps you on track to be productive and positive focused?
Yeah, I have a couple different things that I ebb and flow between myself. I wouldn't say that I stick with one forever. Rob and I have chatted a few times on the podcast about a process called feeding the Gecko, with Gecko, Gecko, being an acronym for a journaling process that I do a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the evening. So it's writing about gratitude, which is common for a lot of people, and just really kind of starting with a couple of different, 3 different things that I'm grateful for, and then experience, writing down a positive experience in the last 24 hours. C is calmness, or essentially meditation, finding some sort of time just to close your eyes and chill a little bit. K is kindness or karma, and just trying to do one random act of kindness for somebody every day. And then O is either outside or work out. So, some sort of sun or, physical activity. And I do that for months and months and months at a time, religiously, and then one day I will just completely stop that, and I need to kind of just switch things up, which I think is important to do once in a while. And a lot of times, like right now, I'm in a phase where I largely work off a to-do list that's not allowed to have more than one thing on it. So it's based off a book called The One Thing, that I have read a few times, and really just having one thing to look down and see that you have to do. So obviously there are other things that we all are doing throughout a day, but that one important thing that's nagging at you that you've been putting off, that's the thing that goes on the list. And before any other big projects are targeted, you've got to cross that one off. And trying to tackle that first thing in the morning, kind of eating that frog right off the bat makes it more likely you're going to do it rather than you try to get back to it later in the day.
Absolutely. I love that. The Gecko analogy and acronym was fantastic. Was that one that you came up with?
Yeah, it's it's similar certainly to some other ideas like how Enrod has savers, which using the word savers as an acronym has a lot of similar elements to it. But at one point, I was asked to write and present a speech for an organization about this sort of thing, about rituals, and I sat down and just thought about what I was largely doing, and it kind of a little further developed. I reordered things so the letters made sense. I could make a word.
Nice. I just remembered that our mutual friend Jason Fellman had talked about you are the original Renaissance man, or at least the modern day Renaissance man. It's true, but you definitely have a lot of hats that you wear, but they all seem to be productive. And some of the things that I liked about those elements of your acronym, I feel like if those were taught in school, at an early age, setting those kinds of values in kids, to be able to go out and present that in their environment, in their community, what a better place we would have, right? The hardest thing for me really in the last couple of years, it hasn't just been the pandemic shutting down access, but it's that people have changed in a lot of ways, right? I mean, they've internalized a lot of their emotional stuff, and there's a lot of self-serving stuff that I've seen, and there's certainly less decency and consideration for others, and so the idea about doing something kind, the karma aspect is great. Gratitude for what we have. A lot of times people take that stuff for granted, right? And it's tough to take it for granted if you're outside and you're looking at your forest space. Here, let's see if I can get back to some of our. There's our green space there.
Nice.
That was for the forest bathing. Yeah. So it's hard to take anything for granted when you're looking at something like that.
Yeah.
Let's hope that Rob's connection's back. I want to know about some of your rituals, buddy.
Well, am I back?
You're back.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I have a thing called Gecko that I like to do every day. And it's gin, ecstasy.
Ooh.
No.
Cognac. Or a cigar.
Kama Sutra.
What's
Which
the
of course leads to the
Yeah, we know what that leads to. Yeah.
And it's a great day. That's a
Wow,
good
What a songwriting inspiration, man. What's the last thing you did that was a kind gesture to someone besides showing up on my show?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, I actually just on the way to the hotel, there was some poor woman was trying to wrestle like 7 kids through the lobby of the hotel,
And you just
and
shot three
I
of them?
helped her herd her children, which I think she was very very grateful for. But I'm a parent myself, so I get it.
Yeah, it's 7. That sounds familiar. All right. I had a great conversation with a friend of mine the other day who was struggling with an illness, and he's one of the most rabid supporters of regional music. And again, I don't want to call him a fan. I thought about how much he supported so many artists that I've seen, and as we talked about this, his illness, he just talked about gratitude, all the things he's grateful for, and he was put in that position where you kind of recognize those things when you're suffering, physically or emotionally. And he was telling me with such reverence about some artists that just changed his life, and how he really discovered regional music fairly late in his life. And when he talked about this girl singing, it was beautiful to watch his face light up. And so I asked him, I said, what was the last voice, or what's a voice that you listen to that brings you to tears? And without any hesitation, he told me. But I'm curious to know, maybe from Rob, you're a lyricist and you're somebody who's, I can tell you're an empath, man. You're somebody who's very passionate about your writing. Is there a voice out there that just inspires you and moves you to the point of tears or tears of joy?
Oh, a lot. There's a lot. I couldn't narrow it down to one. I actually just literally hours ago, I had a funny conversation with my wife because I learned that the Peter Gabriel song "Come Talk to Me"
Yeah.
what he wrote for his daughter, which I didn't know this. He was divorced from his wife, and she had custody of his daughter, and his daughter was not speaking to him. And he wrote the song "Come Talk to Me" about that. And when I learned this, I, Googled it really quick, and I saw there was a live performance of him doing the song with his daughter singing the harmonies with him.
Oh my
And I
God.
thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And I watched it, and I just started crying. I
Yeah.
mean, I like bawling like a child.
Jeez.
And I sent the video to my wife, and I said, I just watched this, and I cried like a baby because I didn't know the backstory. And then she wrote me back and said, well, now I'm crying like a baby, you
Oh
dumb
yeah.
jerk.
I'm not going to share
So,
that link in the broadcast of this show later because the original or when Peter did that on that Secret World Live tour and he had Paula Cole singing that part with
All
him,
right.
that would bring me to tears. Like
yeah.
there's such an emotional song and the way they sang together and the way he sang with Kate Bush, but really Peter Gabriel on that Secret World Live with Paula Cole, that I could find myself tearing out many
Yeah.
times. How about you, Mark? Is there? I will preface this by saying I was not a lyrics guy until the last couple of years. It was what I listened to secondarily. So when I listened to music, the melody was something I definitely resonated with first, and lyrics came later. Are you that kind of drummer, Mark, or are you a lyric guy in conjunction with the rest?
Yeah, no, I think I would largely, be with you on that, where it wasn't kind of a place where I was coming from something I wasn't paying attention to very much for a long time. But I think especially getting into recording more and more, that's something I've tried to be a lot more cognizant of because of how much the parts that I play can really affect the emotion of a tune or moments when you really want to do some word painting of some sort, in a non-cheesy way, hopefully. Um, and so, yeah, I feel that I've had the fortune of working with a number of artists who just are really, really phenomenal lyricists. I mean, there are certainly lyrics that are good, but are fairly on the nose and a little obvious. But honestly, I mean, not to blow smoke, but Rob, for one, as you know, is just a phenomenal lyricist and
Oh, thanks, man.
writes in metaphor a lot. But that's not something that he sits down to do because if you've spent any time having conversations with Rob, which I've done once or twice, you realize like that's the way he talks, that's the way he thinks, and so it's natural that's going to come out in his lyric writing, and there are a few other singers in the area who I really have become insane fans of just their lyric writing. A couple of people that I've worked with, like Amanda Richards and Stephanie Strange,
Stephanie
Ines.
Strange.
Yeah, Ines Baltranena from Guatemala. Just, really, really interesting lyricists who make me stop and think a little bit more and sometimes I have to ask some questions about what's really going on, especially if I'm recording with them so that I can kind of get in their heads or under their skin a little bit. But yeah, it's something that I've definitely realized I needed to pay more attention to.
I love the idea, the word paintings. That's a great thought. As somebody who tries to complement the music as a percussionist or an instrumentalist in a band, to complement things so that they don't cover up the vibe and the feel of something that's written with such emotion, right? So
Yeah.
I was kind of the reason I asked you about that. Have there been opportunities for you or times where you sat down to play a floater tune and been so moved that those kinds of emotions come up where you're just flush with with either tremendous sort of sadness about like the beauty of the song, or is there something that's triggered you on stage where it's actually brought you to tears?
Yeah, I don't know if I would exactly say two tears, but that is, I've gotten very emotional a number of times with Floater on stage, and not even necessarily just because of the lyrics themselves, but the band is extremely dynamic.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are certainly the heavy metal influences that pop in, but there are all the spacious psychedelic type influences that are in there as well. And getting to play that music that does, ebb and flow like that, even just within a song, sometimes with all of the energy that you have in a room, like like this band does at shows. It's impossible to not kind of get wrapped up in it. And I've definitely had those moments where, number one, I've had those overwhelm moments when, like you just feel everything welling up inside of you. And like I said, maybe not two tears, but just like, whether it's, pride of this, amazing thing we're creating right now, or just, being sucked into the emotion of it all. That's something that definitely happens. And the other thing that happens quite a bit with the band that you can never actually force are those what I've always called like blackout moments where you're rocking out playing and you're so locked in and in the moment that chunks of a song go by and suddenly you come to and you realize you've just been deep in this thing and you're oblivious to everything else. And that's the sort of thing, those blackout moments are what I've always called the magic moments of making music. And I don't care who you are, you cannot force that to happen. It's one of those things that can only just happen in the right moments when you are 100%. It's completely being present. It's, doesn't matter if I'm, like trying to break my heads and cymbals in the middle of a tune. You're just so present that's like everything just disappears and I kind of black out and I'm oblivious to anything else. And that's, to me, like that's the drug. That's what I'm like. I play music to try to get back to, and I'm just hoping that I get that high on the next show. And sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't.
For me, I could probably count on two hands the amount of times that's happened, and I've sought it forever, right? My entire life. I started playing gigs professionally 16, and I remember those times, and there were times like that felt emotional, like tears. But I've tried to explain it to non-musicians, right? That there's a rush there. There's an orgasmic kind of feeling, right? It is somewhat that kind of intensity, but the only time you get it is in a collective. Like I would never feel that, performing like a solo drum piece or anything. No. There's some kind of shared energy when you've got guys on stage. I haven't felt it, I don't think, in a rehearsal space. I think it's also shared energy with a room. And I remember one of those moments that we did, Rob, like one of the first gigs that we did together, I think it was a Crystal Ballroom show. And I felt it when we played it, and I felt it watching you guys and watching how tightly knit your audience was with you. You were like a minister up there. It was crazy how, like there was nothing contrived or pretentious or anything about it. They were with you completely, man. I mean, you could be Jim Jones, tell them to drink the Kool-Aid, and they would do it. They felt every ounce of emotion in the song. And I felt it too, man. It was one of those things that you can't bottle it. There's no way you could explain it to somebody if they haven't experienced it. And I don't know anybody that's actually come up with it in a scientific term for that euphoria, but it is that drug that keeps you coming back. We all know people that have said, screw it, man. I can't take the rest of the music industry, the struggles anymore, and I give it up. And I feel sad for a lot of those people that are never going to have that experience again. To me, like that's kind of throwing in the towel for any opportunity, and so. And trying to explain that, because my son, I've got a 22-year-old son, who's an amazing drummer, much better drummer than I am, and he's now sort of a R&B hip-hop artist and singing, and he's had a handful of shows on stage, and I try to explain to him, once you get that feeling, you'll never, ever stop wanting to chase it. And we talk a lot about the addiction part of it, Mark. I'm glad you brought that up. I've been sober like almost 10 years now, and there is a kind of rush that comes along with that I may have felt in somewhat similar ways with other things I put in my body. And I try not to scare my kids away from that by telling them, man, you're predisposed to have this gene. So you've got an addictive personality. And as a musician, you can channel that in really beautiful ways. You can feel that much more passionate about what you're doing. And I think it's really cool, as Jason mentioned, Mark, you're this Renaissance man, and you truly are too, Rob. And I think I'm grateful that you guys have taken and channeled this energy into doing something that really helps other people with the podcast. I think that's a gift that.
Oh, thank you. Wow, that's the hope.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I know you're not. Well, none of us do this for the financial reward, right? I mean, it's all
What?
about. I think I find myself talking more than I want to on this because I really value what you guys have to say about your inspiration and your values. One thing I do on every show, if you guys are cool with it, I love to ask people about their guilty pleasures. So somebody that really feels like they know you, Rob. Not only do you have your rabid fans, you've got your family members, right? You've got your kids and your wife and dear friends. Somebody that thinks they really know you, what would they be surprised to find out about you? Maybe some guilty pleasure you might have.
Oh, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what anyone would think was surprising about me. You know? Is that, I mean, Mark, does that?
Maybe you can answer for each other. What's something that you feel like somebody might be surprised to find out about each other?
What would be surprising to people about Mark? That's much easier for me to answer.
Let's hear it.
Gosh, let's see. I think there's a lot of things that people might be surprised. I don't know what Mark's guilty pleasure would be. Honestly, if I were to guess, I would say it's something that's not healthy because the guy is just so healthy.
Right, I can see
You know,
that.
it's like eating something with carbs in it or something. I don't know. He'd be like, that's my guilty pleasure.
Okay, is there one? Is there a secret carb?
It's all those Swiss cake rolls. No, no. I mean, it's funny because I don't feel I eat all that healthily. No, that's a toughie actually. Coming up with a guilty pleasure or thinking about something that people would be surprised to know about Rob.
How about musical guilty pleasures? And I'll tell you, there was a string of people that on my show that said ABBA, and I was like, "There's nothing guilty about ABBA. ABBA's great, man."
Yeah.
I mean, but Dave Ellefson, bassist from Megadeth, had talked about how, yeah, you know, early on in his career, he didn't want to admit that he's actually a big disco fan, but the chicks, you know, he said the girls he would acknowledge, he would tell them about it. But you know, the metal, he lost all his metal cred when he would tell somebody he liked disco. But he, you know, he divulged that secret right here, so I mean, for me, I'm a horrible consumer of vapid butt rock, and so that's maybe why I wasn't such a lyric fan. That when I look back now and realize how completely, you know, superficial lyrics were in the '80s hard rock stuff, you know, but. I have way too much in my collection, but
That's definitely that's a whole genre that I feel like I lived through and watched everyone around me go crazy for that I never got.
yeah,
It never clicked. And I get around people all the time. They're like, "What? Kiss? No?" And I'm like, "Nope, sorry."
I get it.
You know, I mean, I respect that you're a fan. I completely respect it. I'm not a hater. I got no hate in me for stuff that doesn't work for me. I don't think it's because it's bad.
If I went through your playlist, though, what might I be surprised if I can run across like Bieber or Christina Aguilera or something like that? Like, which I think they're both actually more talented than most people would think, you know. But
in my playlists, what would be surprising? Oh boy.
what are your kids? This might tell us.
They're 17 and 18.
I'm going to answer that. I think that people would listen through Rob's playlist, and some people would be surprised at how many times he listens to 21 Pilots.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And they're freaking awesome. They're great.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh
Sure.
yeah, they're great.
Yeah. Musically, do you have any in your guilty pleasure list, Mark?
You know, I will say along those lines, and something that like not many people would know about me is that when it comes to music and even TV, I'm totally all about shuffles or, you know, random playlists, and I am that guy who will never zip to the next song or change the channel. Like on the road, you know, if I'm on the road with the band, if I pop on the TV, which I didn't own a TV between the ages of 16 and, you know, probably 35 or something like that. But if I pop in to a hotel room and turn the TV on, it gets turned on, and pretty much almost no matter what's on, it's what I watch. I am not a channel surfer, and it's the same when it comes to music. I think it's because I can always find something to dissect. You know, it's a little difficult for me to turn off that producer mindset and not be analyzing music or trying to figure out how something was done on the TV show, and I can find that in anything. So, I, you know, like my wife is sometimes surprised that, you know, I'll walk in the middle of a show going on. I don't want to, you know, you don't have to rewind. You don't have to catch me up on what's going on. And I am in the middle of the cliffhanger. I am the first guy that'll be like, I got something to do. I'm more than happy to leave. I don't need to know how it ends. Like, I got what I needed out of it. I watched for a few minutes and I got some little idea, and, you know, maybe saw how some interesting scene was shot, and, you know, it'll somehow come out in some future project. And I think Rob and I talk a lot about creating versus consuming, and how we try to spend more of our time creating rather than consuming. And I think that it's tough for me to be consuming without thinking about how the creator is going to use that. So I love, you know, if I'm on Spotify, I love the daily, you know, random playlists that are put together, or especially just the new stuff that's out. It's kind of a way to stay current. However, I don't really stay current because I don't necessarily pay attention to who the artist was. So, you know, I probably have listened to the latest thing that somebody asked me about, but I'm like, I don't know, I've never heard of them before, but it was on that list probably. So,
I'm not going to hear Neil Young anymore, though.
Oh, I know. It's gone.
Yeah.
Ripped off there.
What do you guys feel about that? Rob, you first. I mean, the Neil Young, Joe Rogan sort of standoff.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the Neil Young Joe Rogan standoff is.
So, you know, you probably know that, you know, since Joe Rogan has become a so-called expert on scientific, you know, studies of the pandemic, you know, he recommended that people not get the vaccine and instead do the horse stabilizer or whatever. So,
right.
Neil Young said, you know, I'm pissed that Spotify, who's paid his contract, will continue to support that misinformation, so I don't feel like I want my music represented there. So either you have Neil or Joe, and they took Neil Young's catalog away, and
it chose Joe Rogan over Neil Young, huh?
And
Man,
I've
that's
seen a lot.
Stupid move, Spotify.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and so we feel like that, right? Because we understand the magic behind what Neil Young has produced and what he brings to the artistic side, but we are a nation of consumers, right? And fewer creators, and younger people are listening to Spotify, and they might not be so critical in thinking. They may not think, well, even though Joe Rogan may say that may not be truth, right? Or whatever Joe Rogan has studied, maybe that's not completely accurate. But yeah, it's unfortunate, right, that it couldn't become a conversation. It just kind of. One thing I really love about your guys' podcast is that you seem to you'll pose a scenario, you'll pose a shot, perspective on something, and then you'll talk through it and you'll give each other's sort of feedback, and it is very conversational. But at the end, you feel like both of you have grown from each other's you know, sort of discussion and thoughts on it, rather than the divisive kind of part that you see in the Spotify conversation. And I wasn't trying to you know, get you guys on board any of that. When I read it, the sociologist in me can look at the conversations that go on beneath that, you know, people's feedback and you know, comments about, you know, well, who the hell is Neil Young anyway, right? You think, well, okay, so what was the point behind him saying this, right? Whether the outcome, it's not so much the outcome, but it's really, to me, the process and the unfortunate part that it didn't become something that could be a conversation, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But,
well, Neil Young has never been afraid to take a stand, and he has always backed himself up. I mean, it's from the very beginning, you know. He he knew what he was doing when he put out Southern Man, and it got a lot of hate, and he got death threats, and he was like, I'm still playing it, you know. I mean, right. he just is, he's that guy. Whether you like it or agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. He's just going to be him, you know.
Yeah. Musically, and I know that I'm probably taking up some of your work time right now, so we can start winding it down. But Rob, has there been a lyricist or an artist like that that inspired you to take more risks?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the early on when I was very young and I was kind of toying around with guitar and listening to music and some of my earliest memories, my parents would play guitar and sing when I was in the bathtub when I was a little kid, and I always thought it was like magic, you know? It seemed like they were doing some sort of voodoo, and there were I, there was something about singing over chords that just seemed like it was beyond human. It was
Right.
like they had elevated and become something mystical. And then, they would finish and they would put the guitar down and I'd be like, no, 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 keep going. And so when I kind of started picking it up and trying to do it myself, it all felt very like, how do the pieces fit? How does this go together? How do you do it? Well, how does this work? And it was people like Jim Morrison or David Bowie who were embracing a sort of Dadaist sensibility of, Simon Le Bon did an incredible job too of
Hmm.
writing in a way that wasn't necessarily part one plus part two plus part three equals the point of the song. It was not, I mean, Neil Young's great, but Neil Young is a very linear,
Sure.
structured storytelling song creator,
Hmm.
and it really for me was, you guys used the phrase earlier, word painting, and I think I kind of fell in love with a number of different artists whenever I would hear something and I would say, what are they singing about? What is happening here? And I knew, like, listening to a bunch of the Doors stuff, I just got that feeling of like, I don't really know what Jim is getting at, but I know what it's making me feel.
Wow. Yeah.
And and that became to me sort of the goal, was like, I don't necessarily want to. It's one of the reasons I get frustrated when people say, what's this lyric mean, or what's this song, why did you write this here? And I say, well, what did you feel?
Right.
Because the goal for me is not to get you to believe something or think something or know something. The goal for me is to get this feeling to enter your body. And so, yeah, as far as influence, that's a few different, but there are a number of different influences. That really, for me, at a young age, was sort of one of those, oh, okay, so that's, the spoken word artist Ken Nordine. I would listen to Word Jazz and that Colors album like crazy because he would just talk over music, but the way that he spoke, I mean, I would laugh out loud at the funny parts and just feel like crying at the tragic parts, and it would all be about things that he noticed while walking his dog or something, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling, but
Yeah.
yeah,
The people's perspective about a particular lyric or what a song meaning is, you know, my father's a painter and a sculptor and a printmaker, and I remember getting frustrated when I would see his openings and people would come up to me and say, you know, what is this painting all about? And I think, well,
right,
you know, I mean, it's not like it has to follow a storyline, right? It doesn't have, and so being able to have, someone's perspective and what that painting means to you, what it says to you, and if it doesn't resonate with you, it doesn't have to, that's the beauty about art. And, um,
yeah.
um, as a kind of an aside, and I may know this answer just because of your lyric content, personal preference, singing bass players, Sting, McCartney, which one?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I have a tremendous respect for both. I would say McCartney, just if for no other reason than based on volume. I mean, he's just such a prolific, incredible creator. The guy has been a fountain of genius forever.
Yeah,
And that's, no knock on Sting at all,
sure. No.
but, um, yeah, I guess if I had to categorize, I'd probably say McCartney. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Um, on your end, Mark Powers, uh, as a, because I don't want to paint you in just in the drummer category because that's definitely not who you are. But there's always the like the rock, side of things where people would always say Bonham or Peart, right? But I want Gad or Kalyuda.
Oh man, man, like Gad's got more hit records, man.
Okay, yeah,
It's like Kali again, like such different players, but Kaliuda's got chops for days, and some of the things he comes up with playing, I wish that I could understand, for sure. And, I've loved, everything, I got way into him when I got into Zappa stuff for a while. And, but at the same time, while there's tons of feel and certainly, hit records and stuff, as somebody who's really embraced recording and focusing on that sides of things in my career, you just can't go wrong with Gad, man.
Yeah, it goes along with the feeling, right? I mean, and I've had that conversation with a lot of people about, the drummer conversation always comes up, especially as an up and coming drummer, as you're young and trying to play fast and trying to play everything with as many drums as you can. And then, but I remember like there was a big video that was like, it became viral way before the internet, right? Like there was the Modern Drummer Festival, I think, where they had Vinny Colaiuta, Dave Weckl, and Steve Gadd.
Oh, right.
And it was the three of them were basically, trading eights, and they'd go around, they do their solos, and Vinny Colaiuta just go blistering fast stuff, and Dave Weckl again blistering fast stuff, and then Gadd would come out with eighth notes and just primitive guttural stuff that felt like the room was spinning and then all of a sudden locked in, and you couldn't help but just be drawn into what you felt when you heard him. And when I was young, I thought, oh my gosh, look at how fast those other guys are. And now when I watch it, it's not even a question for me, because you realize the magic of less is more, and really
also,
yeah.
Gad's ghost strokes are freaking bourbon, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's a legend behind that, right? And there's nothing that Vinny can't play, right? And I would say that Weckl has sort of become that guy too. But Vinny's most popular records are the ones that he trims back on, right? I mean, the
sure,
records,
exactly. Yeah.
And even like he played a Megadeth album for.
Yeah, you mentioned Megadeth earlier. Yeah.
But he wasn't doing all the crazy ghost strokes and everything then, But I love the idea that those all tie into feelings, how these people made you feel, and again, this brings me back to your podcast. And so, folks, if you've not done so, whether you're on Spotify or you're at Apple Podcasts or any of the other channels, I encourage you to go to Igniter Pod, grab that link, and subscribe to the podcast. How many episodes do you guys have now?
I think today, maybe episode 16 or 17 went up, something like that.
It's in something like that.
It's still in its infancy.
Somewhere.
That's a lot of great content, though, man. How long do you guys typically take to produce the show? Is there a lot of editing?
Couple hours, I think.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Everything just flows. Really, there's so much good stuff, and it's free. You guys go out and grab this podcast. I mean, you could spend $1,200 and go to a Tony Robbins weekend, or you could listen to the Igniter podcast for free. Spend a couple of hours and get something really beneficial out of it. So
yeah, and you're not going to have to deal with any of that running over hot coals stuff that it makes you do.
Well, I do. When I listen to your podcast, I like to do something like that because that's where I derive my creative side. But no, I think I love the direction that it's going in. I'm really a big fan of you guys, both in creative ways and really the fact that you're doing positive, productive stuff for people. So I'm grateful, that all the way from Burbank and Mark's rock studio right there, and me out in the rainforest. I appreciate you guys being able to spend some time with me. What's your next podcast about? Do you have a guest, or are you guys doing a concept?
We have a couple different coming up. We've got some guests that are right around the corner. Like so, we launched an episode just this morning, which is on the concept of idea sex. So people need to go check out Rob and I talking about sex.
Okay.
And yeah, it's an interesting one. So yeah, that's the latest.
I love it. Is there somebody on your list of like the ultimate guest on your podcast that you'd love to have? Somebody that's like,
oh my God.
I'm
yeah.
sure you have a list, right?
We do have a list, yeah,
Right.
and we probably shouldn't name any names, but we've got some good ones on the list. We're just trying to get out of our infancy a little bit so that we can attract a few of those names.
Yeah. Well,
Honestly, I mean, my wish list are mostly comedians.
okay.
Probably some directors. I mean, I'd love to get David Lynch if we ever could, but I don't think that's going to happen.
That might actually through John Neff, right? Locally.
Yep,
I
I've
think
worked
that
with John a little bit.
Yep. I bet that would be the connection, I would think. So you mentioned the comedians. The podcast world really became sort of something that I just soaked right up through Mark Maron's WTF podcast, right? That was when I first discovered his pod, the idea of this comic that was sort of a failed comic that turned his failures into something that became, right behind Joe Rogan and Howard Stern. I think it's like the number 3 podcast out there right now. And certainly for a long time he had been. And he is one of those guys, right, that all of his guests were primarily comics, the guys that he grew up, everybody from Robin Williams and Billy Crystal and Jerry Seinfeld, the early days, to, it became Barack Obama in his garage doing his podcast, right, after a few years. And he was at the top of my list, by the way. So if you're watching, President Obama, I'd like to slap. But what I noticed about a lot of those comedians, right, is that people have this sense that comics are just always happy, right? They're always full of joy and they're jovial, but deep seated, there's a lot of emotional issues going on, and they're sort of projecting on stage something that's completely outside what's going on in their heart and their mind. If you had them on the show, who do you feel like, what comedian do you feel like resonates well with the Igniter ideals?
Oh man, I mean, there's a number that I could think of. The first one that pops into my head just off the top would be Paul F. Tompkins.
Oh.
I'm just a huge fan of his, mostly because I'm so enamored by improv comedy, sketch improv comedy. It's one of my favorite things in the world, and I feel like the feeling that I have watching good improv comics bounce off of each other is, I think, what sports fans have when they go to see, like, if you're like a Lakers fan or something and you go bonkers if you go to the game. Mm-hmm. That's what it feels like. It's such an incredible feat of intellectual athleticism, Sure. Yeah, and he's a grandmaster of improv.
Ah, fantastic. How about you, Mark? Who's on your list?
I definitely want to stretch further and further out of our worlds, which is something Rob and I have chatted quite a bit about, because our network of musicians is huge. And while we'd love to have every musician who we know on the podcast, it's great to mix it up, because we know our listenership is varied quite a bit. We want to get ideas from a lot of different people because there's a lot of crossover. So for me, I think that there are a number of authors and even other podcasters. And a biggie for me that I would really love to get is author Stephen Pressfield. He's written a number of books, but like The War of Art is one of his big ones. And he really talks a lot about what Rob and I talk about. I think he resonates well with our podcast because we're talking about getting around creative blocks, and he talks about that block. He gives it a name. It's resistance. It's the dragon that you're trying to slay to get to the other side and, get the reward of your work getting done, or whatever that might be. And very interesting gentleman. And I think that his whole angle on things would fit our podcasts and everything very well. So slowly working on that one. We'll see.
I think it's great. So Thursday, January 27th, when this aired live, you guys can look back at this a year from now when you've gotten both of those bucket list guests and think, remember when we were chatting about that? That's just a point in time, right? So
Right.
I really do want to thank you guys so much, man. For me, I get a lot of inspiration from both what you guys do on the podcast, but also you guys as humans, and can't wait to spend more time with you as we're allowed to be around each other a little bit more. So I encourage people to go to Igniter Pod first, and then keep an eye out for upcoming floater releases and Rob Wynia releases. And you said Powers Percussion is how people can get a hold of you, Mark,
Yep.
for some lessons and some
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, listen, you guys. Give my best to Dave Amador and your collective folks as well. And guys, if you came in late, jump back in. You can hear all the secret code that Rob created, just special for our podcast. You can go to igniterpod.com, check out their podcast. If you want, I'll post this back up here. You can go to youtube.com/allaccesslive with Kevin Rankin. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. You can go back and see all those great guests that we've talked about and that will be upcoming. And then if you feel like you want to support this as well, I gotta pimp this, right? I'll have my little Venmo link here. So if you've got a smartphone, hit it now at Kevy Metal. You can support the show by going to at Kevy Metal or clicking that QR code and just throw me a buck or two, and I'll have more production capabilities so I can bring great guests and we can do this thing virtually from the road. That's my intent. Is once we get back on tour, I want to be just doing this backstage. So
Nice.
Yeah.
So Rob, Mark, both of you guys, I totally appreciate it. You guys have a beautiful day. Enjoy Burbank or Liverpool, wherever you really are. And Mark, man, thank you again for being willing to corral this thing in. And
bet.
you guys go out there, slay those dragons and the creative blocks, and continue to do great things. Feed the Gecko.
Right on. You
Thanks,
too,
Kevin.
man. Thank
All
you.
right, you guys, thank you so much. Everybody have a beautiful